If you want to get promoted at work, don't make the mistake of focusing on possibility or impossibility instead of focusing on cost. And here's what I mean. Typically, when people think, okay, I want to get a raise, I want to get a promotion, what they do is they start looking laterally and they freak themselves out. They look at, well, look at all the people in my group and everybody wants that raise. Everybody wants that promotion. Why would it be me? Or they look around at what's going on with the company and they say, look, we're not making any money this year. We're actually having a down year, or we've had a bad couple of quarters. So they're not going to be giving out raises. And if I speak up, I'm just going to make a jerk of myself. And then they freak themselves out and they scare themselves out of asking for that raise. They scare themselves out of asking for that promotion. And what I would caution you on is that if you do that, you're not going to make any headway financially. Whereas if you focus instead of on possible, impossible, if you focus on cost, if you look at first, okay, so what is the cost for me of not moving up financially, of not moving forward financially in my career through a raise, through a promotion and a raise associated with that? So what are the costs? Let's look at the three big costs that you don't want to pay. First, one of the costs of not getting a promotion and a raise, or just a raise at this point in your career, is the short-term cost. Meaning over the next 12 months, looking at, am I going to have money in my pocket? And you might have money in your pocket today, but as we know from history, we look at over and over and over again, as history has progressed, the cost of stuff goes up, the cost of goods goes up, the cost of everything goes up. So a year from now, you're going to have less money because you're going to be buying eggs, you're going to be buying butter, you're going to be putting a tank of gas in your car, and it's all going to ultimately cost more in the future than it does now, than it did last year. So if your income stays static, then you're going to have less money for discretionary spending, or less money to spend on those basic necessities that you need to sustain yourself and to sustain your family. So if you're not going for that raise, if you're not going for that promotion, then that's going to really hamper your ability to live as you live now and to take care of yourself and your family. And so if you start by looking at possibility versus impossibility, like, ooh, are they giving out raises? Ooh, they're not even giving out promotions right now, so I absolutely can't go for one. If you start there, then you won't go for one. Whereas if you start by saying, the short-term cost, I can't deal with that short-term cost. I'm going to need to find a way to get a raise this year, to get a promotion this year. And then you're going to get creative about how you can be that most valuable employee, and then demonstrate that you are, so that you indeed get that raise. Second, the long-term costs of not getting a raise this year, of not getting promoted and a raise associated with it, the long-term costs are staggering. So look at it like the average cost of living right now is around 4%, and that's average. So we're not going to say you're going to get a 4% raise. You might get less than a 4% raise, and 4% is more than it was a couple of years ago. It's a little less than it was last year, but this is how they're averaging. So if you're making, let's just say, making a clean, we're going to go with a round number, 100,000 right now. And then with those annual 4% raises, you're going to be making, and that's a cost of living increase. When I say an annual 4%, that's a cost of living increase. That's a baseline. And if you're going to be making those yearly, then in 20 years, you're going to be making 220,000. Well, if you're making 100,000 now, in 20 years, you're going to want to be making more than 220,000. So let's say you can bump it up. Let's say you get more of a significant raise, more than the cost of living increase, but we'll stay conservative. Let's say you make on average, 7% increase, meaning that some years you're getting a real bump, real increase, and then it will stay pretty static for the next year till your next promotion, let's say, or significant increase. But let's say conservatively, it's more like 7%. And then 20 years from now, you're making just about 400,000. So almost double what you would have made. And that's just because you bumped it up. You were able to bump it up a little bit. And If we go further, and let's say you can bump it up to 8%, then in 20 years, you're almost making $500,000. That's a real difference. Those are significant differences than just going with what you're going to be given, because that's what's standard. In another study, when people got a 0.5% increase more, that's a 0.5% increase more earlier in their career, then by the time they got to 65, they were able to retire. Whereas the people who did not get that 0.5%, 0.5% increase earlier on, by the time they got to 65, they had to work another 10 years. They had to work till they were 75, 10 more years to make that same amount of money. So this is the idea of compound interest. Wherever you are in your career, don't wait, don't delay to figure out how you can be the most valuable contributor at work, and then demonstrate that, and then ask for that raise and ask for that promotion, because you've got a leg to stand on. You've made a case. Because if you don't, the long-term costs are not costs that you're going to want to deal with. And you got to think about your house and paying for housing for you, for your family, maybe travel, just security and retirement, being able to help your kids with their education or help them later as they're starting families. If you want to retire on time, if you want to retire early, the long-term costs of not getting that raise and getting that promotion and raise along with that, at this point, any point in your career, it's going to cost you a lot, not just in the short term, but a lot in the long term. And so again, yeah, you've got to be the right person. You got to demonstrate that you're that right person. And so you got to figure out how to do that, how to become the most valuable person, and then to show that you are. Third, if you're not actively seeking a promotion or actively seeking a raise, then guess what? Somebody else is. Somebody else in your group is actively making a case for why they should get a raise, why they should get a promotion. And maybe you're saying, well, gosh, Mim, there's no promotions that are available. But that doesn't mean that somebody else isn't demonstrating and making a case for why actually there should be, or why, and that they should be the one that gets it. In other words, there might be an invisible raise or invisible promotion with your name on it, but you never get it because you look at, well, maybe there's nothing available, so I guess I'm just going to keep doing my job. And you do a great job at your job, but you're not putting your head up and saying, but what else? How else can I contribute? How else can I create value, greater value, and then be able to make a case from that so that it actually makes business sense for them to give you a raise, for them to create a promotion for you because of the value that you can bring to the organization. And if you're not doing that, somebody else is. So the costs of not asking, of not being the most promotable person, making yourself that person, and then demonstrating that you're that person. The costs are great, short-term costs, long-term costs, and then just the cost of there's a promotion out there with your name on it, but you don't get it because you didn't go for it, but somebody else went for it. You don't want to have to live with that. You don't want to have to live with the costs that are associated with that. So it's time to, if you're not actively looking at, okay, what am I bringing to the work that I do? And what's the value that I bring? And how can I most demonstrate that value? And how can I most increase that value? So if you're not doing that, then it's just time to take a look at the value you bring, see how you can bring more value, and then see how you can demonstrate that and ask for that next level.